Naval Battle of Malaya. On December 10, 1941, during World War II in the Pacific, the British naval vessels HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse were sunk by Japanese bombers in the South China Sea off the east coast of Malaya, now Malaysia, and the Straits Settlements, now Singapore. This engagement, known as the Naval Battle of Malaya in Japan, occurred without air support for the British ships. Their mission, known as Force Z, was to intercept the Japanese invasion fleet but failed to do so. Instead, they encountered Japanese heavy surface units on their way back to Singapore and were subsequently attacked and sunk by long-range torpedo bombers. This event highlighted the vulnerability of even the heaviest naval assets to aerial attacks without air cover, especially in the wake of the recent attack on Pearl Harbor. The sinking of these two British ships significantly weakened the British Eastern Fleet in Singapore, which relied mainly on submarines to engage the Japanese fleet until the Battle off Indao on January 27, 1942. Just a month later, on February 15, 1942, Singapore itself fell to the Japanese, resulting in the largest surrender in British history. In October 1941, the British Defence Committee discussed reinforcing their naval presence in the Far East in response to the fall of the Kono government in Japan. Winston Churchill and his cabinet supported deploying a modern battleship to deter Japanese actions, following their earlier assessment of Japanese intentions. The Royal Navy had initially planned to send Nelson-class and Revenge-class battleships to Singapore as part of their offensive strategy, but the Nelson-class ships couldn't deploy due to damage to HMS Nelson. Crew leave and a gun refit delayed the deployment of HMS Rodney until mid-December. The King George V-class battleship HMS Prince of Wales was the only worked-up battleship available for immediate deployment. On October 20, the committee decided to send Prince of Wales to Cape Town, South Africa, with the option to proceed to Singapore after a review. This allowed Prince of Wales to remain available for potential emergencies in home waters. Churchill's proposal was criticized for his belief in the power of battleships, and he advocated for a squadron of 3 modern ships for deterrence. The plan included Prince of Wales, the battlecruiser HMS Repulse, and the aircraft carrier HMS Indomitable, but it had to be revised when Indomitable ran aground. The dispatch of capital ships to Singapore had been part of strategic planning since the 1920s, although the scale of deployment had reduced in the 1930s due to new threats in the Atlantic and Mediterranean. Churchill's plan also presumed U.S. cooperation in sending its Pacific Fleet to Singapore or adding to the deterrent value of the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor. Some opposed sending the new King George V battleships to tropical waters like Malaya, citing potential issues with equipment and crew fatigue due to the climate. Force G, which included the battleship Prince of Wales, battlecruiser Repulse, and 4 destroyers, arrived in Singapore on December 2, 1941, and was renamed Force Z. The aircraft carrier HMS Indomitable was supposed to join Force G but had run aground in Jamaica in November 1941, requiring repairs in the United States and rendering it unable to participate. Another aircraft carrier, HMS Hermes, was en route to Singapore but couldn't be deployed due to its slow speed. Admiral Sir Tom Phillips was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Eastern Fleet on December 1. Repulse initially left for Australia but was recalled to Singapore for potential operations against the Japanese. Additional naval assets in Singapore included light cruisers and destroyers, but some of them were under repair and not ready for deployment. Durban and Stronghold were not as fast as other units, so they were left in Singapore. Other cruisers and destroyers were expected to arrive within 3 days. Churchill publicly announced that the battleships Prince of Wales and Repulse were being sent to Singapore as a deterrent against the Japanese. In response, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto dispatched 36 Mitsubishi G-4M bombers to reinforce existing air groups equipped with Mitsubishi G-3M bombers. These bomber crews trained rigorously for low-altitude torpedo attacks and long-range over-ocean navigation, specifically to target naval vessels moving at sea. This marked the first instance in the war where a force of bombers was specially trained and equipped for ship killing, which was a significant development as regular land-based bombers had limited success in attacking ships at sea during that period, especially in the Mediterranean theater. On December 8, 1941, bombers from the Japanese Mahoro Air Group attacked Singapore early in the morning, with the British battleships Prince of Wales and Repulse responding with anti-aircraft fire. However, they did not shoot down any planes, and the ships sustained no damage. Around the same time, news arrived that Pearl Harbor had been attacked, and the United States had lost 8 battleships, making it impossible for the United States Pacific Fleet to send major units to Singapore to reinforce the British. Admiral Sir Tom Phillips had earlier discussed with U.S. General Douglas MacArthur and Admiral Thomas C. Hart that his 2 capital ships were insufficient to confront the Japanese. Still, with the Japanese advancing in Malaya, he felt compelled to use his ships in an offensive role. He assembled his flotilla to intercept and destroy Japanese invasion convoys in the South China Sea. Phillips had doubts about the available air cover from the RAF and other Allied air forces, believing they had limited fighter aircraft. However, one squadron, number 453 Squadron RAF, was designated as the Fleet Defense Squadron to provide close cover for Force Z. Despite concerns about air cover, Phillips decided to proceed with the mission. He underestimated the ability of Japanese aircraft and torpedoes, believed Japanese planes couldn't operate far from land, and thought his ships were relatively immune to air attacks. His flagship, Prince of Wales, had advanced anti-aircraft systems, but the extreme heat and humidity in Malayan waters rendered her radar and ammunition unserviceable. Number 453 Squadron RAF, meant to provide air cover, was not informed of the ship's position until late, and requests for air support were made after the Japanese attack began. Flight Lieutenant Viggers proposed a plan to keep aircraft over Force Z during daylight, but this was declined by Phillips. This lack of timely air support would prove costly, and Viggers criticized Phillips for not requesting help in time. Despite being aware of being shadowed, Phillips did not call for air support, and alternative plans for daytime air cover were also rejected. Force Z, consisting of the British ships Prince of Wales, Repulse, Electra, Express, Vampire, and Tenedos, set sail from Singapore on December 8 to intercept a Japanese convoy heading for Malaya. They aimed to attack near Singapore on December 10. However, Force Z was overflown by Japanese reconnaissance aircraft and later spotted by the Japanese submarine I-65, which shadowed them and reported their positions. This prompted the Japanese to order most of their warships to escort the empty transports back to Cam Ranh Bay in southern Vietnam. The report of British battleships reached Japanese headquarters, leading to the immediate preparation of aircraft for a torpedo attack. Additionally, the Japanese Second Fleet, Southern Force, set out to intercept Force Z, consisting of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. 3 Japanese seaplanes continued shadowing Force Z. As darkness fell, Tenedos was detached to return to Singapore due to low fuel, tasked with contacting Rear Admiral Arthur Palliser, who was liaising with the RAF in Malaya. Phillips, the commander of Force Z, changed course to deceive the shadowing aircraft and then turned south towards Singapore under the cover of darkness. An attempted night air attack by the Japanese was thwarted by bad weather, preventing them from locating the British ships, and they returned to their airfields around midnight. During the night, one of the Japanese seaplanes dropped a flare, mistakenly believing the Japanese heavy cruiser Chokai to be the British ship Prince of Wales. In response, the Japanese force of 6 cruisers and several destroyers turned away to the northeast, while the British force, after spotting the flare, turned away to the southeast. The two forces were about 5 miles 9 kilometers apart but did not sight each other, and the Japanese force went unnoticed on the radar of the Prince of Wales. At 20:55, Admiral Phillips canceled the operation, feeling that they had lost the element of surprise, and ordered the force to return to Singapore. On the return journey, the British force was spotted and reported by the Japanese submarine I-58 at 3:40, although the British ships were unaware of the torpedo attack. The report reached Japanese Air Flotilla headquarters, and bombers from various air groups were dispatched to conduct a sector search for the British ships. These bombers took off at different times and were ordered to proceed to the estimated position of the British ships. On December 10, 1941, Admiral Phillips received a report of Japanese landings at Kuantan on the east coast of Malaya, prompting him to change the direction of Force Z towards that area. Unfortunately, this change wasn't communicated to Palliser, who was liaising with the RAF for air cover. As a result, air cover was not requested over Kuantan until an hour after the Japanese attack had begun. Around 5:15, objects were spotted on the horizon, leading Force Z to turn towards them, thinking it might be the invasion force. However, it turned out to be a trawler towing barges. Later, around 10 o'clock, Tenedos, which had been detached from the main force earlier, reported being attacked by Japanese aircraft. This attack, carried out by 9 Mitsubishi G3M bombers, targeted Tenedos but failed to hit her. Force Z continued to be pursued by Japanese aircraft, and the Japanese eventually converged on the retreating British task force. The first wave of Japanese planes, consisting of 8 Nel bombers, attacked Repulse but caused limited damage. Subsequently, 17 Nel torpedo bombers attacked both Repulse and Prince of Wales, scoring 1 hit on Prince of Wales. This torpedo hit resulted in significant damage and flooding on Prince of Wales. Another torpedo attack, this time by 26 Betty bombers, occurred at approximately 12:20, and Prince of Wales was hit by 3 torpedoes on her starboard side. Repulse, which had previously dodged many torpedoes, was hit on the port side by 1 torpedo. Repulse subsequently capsized and sank. Prince of Wales, now under power from only one propeller shaft, was hit by bombs and started to capsize. Survivors were taken off by the destroyer HMS Express, and Prince of Wales eventually sank at 13:18. The Japanese achieved 8 torpedo hits in total, 4 on each of the British ships, while suffering minimal losses during the attack. The air cover assigned to Force Z arrived too late to prevent the sinking but did encounter a Japanese scouting aircraft, which escaped and confirmed the sinkings to the Japanese. Churchill informed the House of Commons about the sinking of the Prince of Wales and Repulse on December 11, 1941. This marked a significant turning point in the war in the Pacific, as it was the first time that capital ships actively defending themselves had been sunk solely by air power while at sea. The loss of these ships severely impacted the Allied naval presence in the Pacific, leaving them with only 3 operational capital ships, the aircraft carriers USS Enterprise, USS Lexington, and USS Saratoga. However, this event also highlighted the effectiveness of aircraft in naval warfare and led to a greater emphasis on carrier-based air power. Additionally, the sinking of the Prince of Wales and Repulse had a significant psychological impact and caused a loss of morale among the British colonies in Asia. This unrest even resulted in mutinies, such as the Cocos Island Mutiny, although they were ultimately suppressed, with the leaders executed for treason. In response to these losses, the Eastern Fleet withdrew its vessels to Ceylon and the Dutch East Indies and did not receive battleship reinforcements until March 1942. These battleships, including HMS Warspite and 4 Revenge-class battleships, played a limited role in the Pacific and were later redeployed to other theaters. Thank you for watching.